right, let's start with Gaza, the Middle East. Last week, several U.S. officials, including the Secretary and the Vice President, others, talked about the importance of Israel not repeating what it did in the north in the south. And I'm wondering, now that the operations in the south have begun, if you think that they are doing or following your advice.
Let me say a few things about it. One, I think it's too early to make a definitive assessment. The Secretary was very clear about how we want to judge this based on results, not based on intent. I will say that in the first few days of this renewed military campaign against the South, we have seen some things that don't look like the operation as it was conducted in the north. For example, in the north, at the commencement of operations, you saw them ask or order more than 1 million people to move. We've seen a much more targeted request for evacuations here, where the Israeli Defense Forces have identified specific neighborhoods where they plan to conduct military operations and urged in advance of those operations the people in those neighborhoods to move, rather than telling an entire city or an entire region to vacate their homes. So that is an improvement on what's happened before. They have instructed them to move to areas that we know are deconfliction zones. It's one of the things we discussed with them last week. So UN-supported facilities where people can be out of harm's way. So that is an improvement, but what the Secretary made clear in our meetings with the Prime Minister and other officials of the Israeli government on Thursday is that we do not want to see a military campaign in the south that looks like the north. And what we mean by that, we do not want to see the same level of civilian casualties. We do not want to see the same level of mass displacement. They briefed us on plans that were very detailed, that they said were intended to avoid mass displacement and civilian casualties, but as the Secretary made clear, it's not just intent that matters, it's results, and we are watching very closely and will continue to watch very closely before we draw any definitive assessments.
Okay, but there are already reports that the operation in the south has taken a large civilian toll. Do you know? So you don't have a. You still think it's too early to say?
I think it's too early to draw a definitive assessment. I will say that, unfortunately, we do expect to see civilian casualties as a result of this campaign. That is sadly true in all wars. It is especially going to be true in a war in a crowded urban environment where the opponent, Hamas, is using civilians as human shields and hiding themselves, hiding their fighters, hiding their infrastructure behind civilians. So what we have made clear to Israel is that we expect them to comply with international humanitarian law and do everything they can to minimize civilian harm, so we don't see a repeat in the south of what we saw in the north. And with respect to that, we're at the very early stage of the operation, and I think it's too soon to draw a definitive conclusion.